Hey guys, today we're jumping into new faces and new places. This is our second running back episode, running backs in the AFC. So you got to check this one out. Please don't forget to sub up, guys. Subscribe, like, follow, share on YouTube at Frankly Fantasy Football. Let's get after it. All right. Welcome to the show. This is the Frankly Fantasy Football Podcast. We are your hosts, Frankie and Johnny. Frankie, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I'm ready for another damn good week, baby. How about yourself, Johnny boy?
I'm doing fan-goddamn-tastic. Why don't you give me a little, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah? Scale of 1 to 10, solid. Probably like a 7.5, 8 maybe.
I was going to say 6.5 to 7. Yeah, something like that.
We'll get better.
We'll do another one at the end. Yeah, we'll do another one. I'd like to bring it up to 8 or 9 if you can for the next one.
Definitely.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Frankie and Johnny back at it again. We are bringing the content. If you follow us on social media, which so many of you do, we appreciate that. Instagram, Facebook, X, Frankly Fantasy Football. You're seeing all the content that's getting pushed out right now, guys. We just did rookie reviews and went over all the new rookies. We're doing new faces, new places. We did quarterbacks and tight ends. We did running backs in the NFC. And today we're doing running backs in the AFC. Stay tuned because we've got receivers coming as well. All right. Tons of stuff to get ready for your draft, but we got your back for sure. All right, Frankie, let's get right into the new faces, new places, running backs in the AFC. Let's talk about our first guy here. Being drafted pretty high here, man. This is a guy, everybody knows this guy. It's the Yeti. It's King Henry, Derrick Henry. Now with the Ratbirds. I like how you put that in your notes, man. Derrick Henry, illustrious career with the Tennessee Titans, now with the Baltimore Ravens. God damn it. As a Browns fan, that's so
disgusting.
Annoying. Lay it out for us, man. How are we looking with King Henry?
John, King Henry the ninth here is going to be dominant for the Ratbirds. I mean, this is a match made in heaven. It really is. John, he signed a 2-year, $16 million deal, $9 million guaranteed. It's not a small deal for that of a running back at his age. And here's the thing, John, I know you have been calling it for a couple of years now. He's going to fall off a cliff. He's going to fall off a cliff. John, this is not going to be the year he falls off the cliff either. And I'm telling you, dude, last year, he ended up having over 1,100 yards rushing, right? On a Titans team that was pretty bad. Actually, it was 1,167 yards rushing, 12 rushing touchdowns, still in the double-digit figures in rushing touchdowns. He also had 28 receptions, over 200 yards receiving. The dude can still do it all. King Henry is still king. Now, John, when you look at the situation where he's coming from the Titans to where he was literally the team for years. We know this. Ryan Tannehill was their quarterback. Tannehill could only do so much, and then it was literally hand off the ball to King Henry and pray to God his stiff arm rocks some people. You take what he did at Tennessee, you now bring that over to the Ravens with no Gus Edwards, with no JK Dobbins, with nobody really behind him outside of that of Keaton Mitchell, who also has gotten hurt, right? Tore his ACL and had some serious issues last year. John, this is King Henry's domain. You now partner him with Lamar Jackson. So, and then on top of that, Lamar Jackson has the different receiving weapons like that of Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, right? And this is becoming a situation to where he's going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem for defenses. He's going to be a problem for opposing fantasy teams. I absolutely love King Henry in that disgusting purple and black uniform this year, man.
I know. As Browns fans, we deal with the Ravens and the Steelers every year, and they're just such good organizations. They just make good decisions. It pisses me off. So we're going to see him twice a year, Derrick Henry, running right down our fucking throats again. All right, let's look at it from a fantasy perspective here. You're right. I've been calling for the end of Derrick Henry. It feels like 5 years I've been saying this, but realistically, it's probably been 2 or 3. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think this is the year. I think it's going to be status quo for Derrick Henry. Let's take a look at this. All right, so last year he ended up finishing as the RB7. Very strong year, top 10 running back at his age. Now he's being drafted as the running back 11, 34 ADP. So just second, third round there, All right. So you're trying to tell me that he's on a better team that's going to have more scoring opportunities with the mobile quarterback of mobile quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson, and you're telling me he's going to regress and he's going to do less than what he did last year? No Tajay Spears breathing down his neck like he had. I'm sorry. I think Derrick Henry is a great, safe pick, and I just love drafting stud receiver, anchor my team with Derrick Henry. I love that strategy. If you can pull that off, you might have to take him as your RB1. You might be end of second round or early third round. But my God, it just doesn't seem like you can miss here. Am I missing something?
No, John, I don't think you're missing anything. Here's the other key point that I haven't really heard many people talk about. The defense. John, the Titans were behind so often, and Derrick Henry still was able to do what he did. And for those that had him last year, like myself, it was kind of painful because a lot of times he would be scripted out of games because they would need Tajay Spears because they were so far behind. So now they're throwing the ball and all this other stuff. And outside of a couple screens here and there, Derrick Henry is not out running routes, right? He just isn't. He's not that guy. And so now you're telling me, to your point, everything you said is perfect. And then you layer on a top 3-4 defense to where now they're stopping opponents, which he's never seen or had. And now he can just absolutely demolish these and really run down these tired defenses that he's playing against. Dude, I'm telling you, man, this guy is for real on this team. And honestly, it's scary. John, I wouldn't be shocked, man, if we don't see him back as an RB7 or an RB8 and you're getting him at the value of 34 ADP at running back 11. So I'm a Derrick Henry fan this year, man.
What a scary prospect, seeing Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the backfield.
Oh, God.
What do you do? What do you do? Jesus, man. Yeah, so I love taking Derrick Henry. I'm sorry. I normally don't say that, but I think the risk is baked into the price. You're not having to draft him in the first round like you've had to do in previous years. And I think he's going to overperform what he's done in the past. I really do.
John, one quick question for you. Last episode, we talked about Josh Jacobs, right? Josh Jacobs, really sexy. We ended up saying that he was what, John? He was 10th, currently 10th running back, and he was 28th in ADP. You're going to be looking at Josh Jacobs or that of Derrick Henry potentially. Let's just say the back half of the second, early third. Question for you, my friend. Who do you decide to pick between these two guys?
I'm going with Derrick Henry over Josh Jacobs, and it's not even close for me, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, I just think it's much safer. It is a better offense. It's a better offensive line. And this is better than what he's dealt with in the past. It's a better defense, just like you said. They're not going to be coming back from behind in very many games, if any at all. They're going to be running down a lead, and they're going to have Derrick Henry in there just shoving it down their fucking throats, man. Yeah, no, I'm taking Derrick Henry. I feel so much safer anchoring him as my RB1 when I've got some other good receivers than I do with Josh Jacobs. No question about it.
Love it.
All right, let's get on to the next guy here. Another guy that's right in the same ADP range as Derrick Henry, not far off here. Joe Mixon, leaving the Cincinnati Bengals, now with the Houston Texans. Really interesting here, man. This is a guy that I love. Talk to me about Joe Mixon.
Well, John, first and foremost, for the listeners out there, we all know that I've had a little bit of thing with Joe Mixon, kind of want to kick him in the fucking face, as I said a few years ago, and, dogging my family members for drafting him. And boy, did I end up putting my own foot in my own ass, let me tell you. And so now, John, when you go and take Joe Mixon from the Bengals and put him on Houston, I don't want to kick him anymore. I want to cuddle him. I want to hold him. I want to bring him in for a warm Christmas dinner and beautiful soups. Don't know why soups are something, but there's something. And so, John, it's great. He ended up signing a 3-year extension, $25 million, $13 million guaranteed. What does this mean? This means this cat is going to be in Houston for years, for multiple years. You combine what he did for the Bengals, John. He had over 1,000 yards rushing last year. To be exact, 1,034, 9 rushing touchdowns. But here is the thing that people don't talk about enough. He had 52 receptions. He had 52 receptions, 376 yards receiving, and 3 receiving touchdowns. When you think about CJ Stroud, when you think about the other elements that CJ Stroud has around him now, we have Stephon Diggs. We have that of, which by the way, he may be a new face in a new place. We have Tank Dell. We also have that of Nico Collins. So John, there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed. But again, what this does is this opens up Joe Mixon to much more of the playbook, whether it's running between the tackles, whether it's running flare routes, whether it's running Chicago style routes. He is going to be able to get the ball from that of CJ Stroud. And I think he's going to be able to do dirty things with it, man. I think that this cat, from what we have seen in prior years of the Bengals, is only going to, which is kind of crazy to say it like this, but I think he's actually going to be even better than what we have seen due to the team he's around, due to the quarterback play, which he had Burrow, which is excellent. Now he has CJ Stroud, which is excellent. And now with the D'Amico Ryans head coach, I love Joe Mixon, this style of offense.
Yeah, I mean, you look at last year, Joe Mixon was a running back 6. I think we all forget that. It wasn't super sexy. It wasn't one of those guys that you had to have, but he's a guy that performs year in and year out, man. And what I like about it is that the team he's going to is built very similarly to the team he was on. Very similarly with the receiving weapons, with the offensive structure and how they play the ball or play offense. It's a similar situation. And this year, he's currently the 16th running back off the board. So I just think he's going to climb. It's just now August this week. He's going to climb up draft boards. But right now, being drafted off the board at 52, so you're saying he's a 4th round pick? I think he's an excellent value, man. All of the mock drafts that I have done, I go crazy when I see Joe Mixon sitting there because he is a workhorse back. He doesn't really have any competition behind him. You got a little bit of Damian Pierce in there, but Joe Mixon's the guy. He's the dude. They paid him. That is not a small contract for an older running back. So he got paid. He's going to be there. They've got investment in him. 3 down back, 65 targets last year. I mean, you give me that kind of shit. We talked about that with Saquon. Those were Saquon type numbers. That's beautiful. I want it. I'm sorry. I want Joe Mixon on my team. You get him as your RB2. I think you're in great shape. Great shape.
One of the other things too is we got to think about the defenses that he played last year. Guys, he was in the AFC North from when he was drafted. The AFC North has had the Baltimore Ravens, the Steelers, and that of the Browns. And yes, I'm recency bias with the Browns, just being last year being a top tier defense. But still, you look at the last 2 to 3 years, he's had to play nightmare situations. And to your point, has continued to produce at an elite level. You now replace that with those types of defenses, move him now to the AFC South, which, by the way, the teams that are playing, John, are dome teams with that of, the Colts that'll play twice a year. He'll also play in Jacksonville, warmer weather, right? And then obviously, we know Houston with his dome. So all of this plays into it, guys. This isn't just something that is like, oh yeah, no, weather absolutely is real, especially when you come from the AFC North and you play in the back half of the season. It's brutal. So now he's going to be playing in more domes more often, different styles of defense. John, this guy is only going to be able to get better, in my opinion.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. I want Joe Mixon on my team. Okay, let's move on to another guy here. New face, new place. We've got Tony Pollard now with the Titans. Really interesting signing here. Talk to me about Tony Pollard.
This one's interesting, John. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, Tony Pollard came from the Dallas Cowboys running in tandem with Zeke. He definitely was able to take over last year, and he was okay. I'll hit on that in a second. But to your point, he's now playing with the Titans, signed a 3-year, $21 million deal, $10.5 million guaranteed. Dude got paid. John, what he did last year, and actually he's ran in back-to-back seasons, he's now ran over 1,000 yards, which is really good. He's had 6 rushing touchdowns this past year, 55 receptions, 311 receiving yards. And what's really interesting, John? He was actually the 3rd best. Actually pulled that stat graphic, John. He was the 3rd best in yards after contact, okay? And so what this is telling me is if you're trying to tackle Tony Pollard, good luck. He is a handful to do. So now when you think about going from that of the Dallas Cowboys into now of more the Titans realm, to your point, this is really interesting because he's not ground and pound like that of Derrick King Henry was, right? He's very much more like a heavier Tajay Spears. And so, John, I don't know how this is really going to work out because Tajay Spears was absolutely the third down back. And quite frankly, was the speed demon and it worked really well with that of King Henry. But when you look at Tony Pollard, I mean, at 55 receptions, like this is also a guy that needs the rock out of the backfield from the pass catching perspective. So this is really interesting. They did, and we'll hit on this again in New Faces and New Places, John. They signed Calvin Ridley. They still have D-Hop, right? Will Levis, who's a second-year quarterback from that of Kentucky now. Like there's just a lot of interesting items. They signed Tyler Boyd, right, as their receiver 3. So there's a lot of things in the air, a lot of changes on this particular offense. So for me, this is going to be one that I'm going to want to wait on a tad and see how this starts to unfold, John.
Yeah, we're looking at fantasy perspective here. Last year he finished running back 18. This year he's being drafted as the running back 26, coming off at 85 and ADP. So, you're looking at round 7 or so for Tony Pollard. It's not a guy I don't get really excited about. I have to be honest with you. If he had tore it up completely on his own, in Dallas, even for that matter, which, once Zeke left, it really wasn't the same. It really wasn't. It's just a guy that I see myself skipping over often because in that range, there's other options. There's a lot of receivers in those rounds and, other running backs like Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, guys I like much, much more than I like him. DeAndre Swift, even.
Yeah.
I like more than, I just think the upside is much better. I don't see a ton of upside for Tony Pollard in Tennessee. We had Derrick Henry there. That's all we've ever really seen is Derrick Henry. We know how much they love Tajay Spears as well. And based on what Tony Pollard told us when Zeke left, he doesn't want to, be a workhorse back. He doesn't want to carry the entire load. I think they're going to work in Tajay Spears a lot. I think it's going to be very similar to a Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren situation. I think it's going to be a 1A, 1B, and I'm not sure either guy's really going to give you a ton of fantasy value. Maybe in a juicy matchup, you can, play the matchup and put him in for a week. I don't see it as being a guy that you feel good about putting out there week to week.
John, would you say that when he was on Dallas, he was slightly dwindling in play in comparison to Rico Dowdle?
God damn it, Frankie. It's Rico Dowdle.
Okay. I got it. Dowdle. God damn it.
You're only going to get that joke if you watched last episode. Watch. In fact, post it right there, okay? So you can see Frankie just murdering Rico Dowdle's name. Frankie's good for that like every other episode, just completely destroying someone's name.
I like to keep it interesting. Keep you guys on your toes,
Keeping it 100. I like that. Okay. Anything else on Tony Pollard here, man?
Nope. Let's rock and roll, baby.
Let's rock and roll. All right. I just mentioned this guy, and we're going to talk about him right now. Zach Moss, new face, new place, running back in the AFC, now with the Bengals. Very interesting. Okay, talk to me about Zach Moss.
Zach Moss is super interesting, John, especially for this year. Last year, when he went on the Colts, he was absolutely not expected to do anything. He was Jonathan Taylor's backup, and that's all that was. He ended up getting the green light because Jonathan Taylor got hurt, was holding out for contract. There were a bunch of different things happening, and he ran with it. John, really, really interesting. Real quick, he signed a 2-year, $8 million deal, $3 million guaranteed. Stats last year were 794 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 27 receptions, 192 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. But here is the key. John, throw that graphic up. He was 5th in that of rushing yards over expected per carry, right? I remember in the last episode, we called this out in the RYOE for that of Saquon, but we were talking specifically between the tackles. For Zach Wilson, the rushing yards over expected, he was 5th per carry. That is monumental. That means when he got the rock, he was an absolute beast. And so now you go to a team like that of the Bengals. And what's interesting, John, a couple weeks ago, if you would have been like, hey, Zach Moss is their guy, no question about it, I would have been like, totally. What's interesting, though, over the last week or so, Chase Brown, for that of the Bengals, has actually been getting some first-team reps. And so now when you're thinking about it from a fantasy lens, man, this becomes a little bit more muddy, right? Because I thought it was going to be Zach Moss's job 100%. It's not. And Chase Brown is actually performing really well. So this could be really interesting in regards to a two-pronged approach with these running backs, let alone Travion Williams that they also have. So yeah, John, from a fantasy perspective, I'm curious, like what are you thinking here, man? This is tough.
Yeah, it's early. I mean, we talked about it. We're just peeking into August, just the tip into August right now. So we've got a lot of information, a lot of camp, a lot of news that's going to be coming out. But yeah, I mean, the reports on Chase Brown are very good. So we have to monitor that situation. But looking at it, if Zach Moss is the guy, he gets the job and has it, which I do think is going to happen.
Yeah.
He did play very well. He's a very good running back. He can be a 3-down back. I think it's a very similar situation as the Devin Singletary situation. I think these guys are very similar. They're on good teams. They're poised to get a lot of opportunity. The other thing that's interesting that I like about Zach Moss, last year, Zach Moss had, let me pull it up here. Last year, Zach Moss had 37 targets. Now, we just talked about Joe Mixon and how Joe Mixon had 65 targets out of the backfield. Double. He had double the amount of targets that Zach Moss had. Now, if Zach Moss can get more targets, he gets up into that 50 target range.
Crazy.
I absolutely think there's a lot of value there. You're not paying a ton for Zach Moss either. Last year, he finished as the running back 8. This year, he's being drafted as the running back 27, 86 in ADP. So you're looking at around 7th round or something like that. Again, he's one of those guys in those middle rounds where you're looking at picking up depth that I am always clicking on, because I think as a depth piece, it's gold. He could have the opportunity to be a 3-down back and have a ton of opportunity on a very good offense with a great quarterback, in an offense that we've seen have that starting running back have top 24, top 15 running back stats. So I love that situation, man. He's one of those guys I like to grab as insurance for juicy matchups throughout the year. Okay, let's get to the next guy here. Next guy, we got the Gus bus. Frankie, get on that bus, baby. Gus Edwards, no longer on the Ravens, on the Ratbirds. Now he's with the Los Angeles Chargers alongside JK Dobbins. Actually, let's talk about both of these guys. We're going to do JK Dobbins and we're going to do Gus Edwards together, Frankie. Break it down for me, man. What are we doing with this backfield?
Gus Bus, man. Super interesting, right? Traveling with that of Greg Roman there, who came over from the Ratbirds as well. So they have a lot of familiarity with the offensive coordinator, obviously going to that of a Jim Harbaugh style offense, which all that means even more so is ground and pound. That is where Jim Harbaugh thrives. So Gus Bus, man, signed a 2-year deal, $6.5 million, 3.4 guaranteed. Nice little contract for him. But what's interesting, John, is the way he performed last year. He had 810 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, 12 receptions, 180 yards receiving. And again, it's hard not to relay this back, John, if I'm being honest with you, to Derrick Henry. Because if Gus Bus is running for 810 yards, what the hell do you think Derrick Henry is going to be doing? Like, just pause on that for a second. Secondly, really good year for Gus Bus, right? 13 rushing touchdowns. The dude was dominant in the red zone. But now, to your point, when you start thinking about, okay, well, they also brought in JK. What's going on with him? Well, they signed JK to a $1.6 million deal. Certainly not that of what Gus Bus was. But could you imagine having the upside of JK Dobbins if he can get healthy? John, if he can get healthy, this dude could be the starting running back. And I mentioned it last episode on a guy. Go check it out, guys. A guy that I think could be a league winner. I'm not going to say who it is because you got to check it out, right? NFC running backs, new faces in new places. JK Dobbins, if he comes into form, John, could also be a league style winner. You're getting him for nothing, right? You're getting him for absolutely nothing. Borderline undrafted in multiple leagues. Yet, could you imagine if he takes over even as a 1B, a true 1B? And so for me, man, that's trade value. It's so much more than that. But this style of offense, from the Chargers' perspective, they lean on that of running backs, especially with the Jim Harbaugh offense. Again, we go back to the rookie review, man. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. That is what they're going to replicate here with JK Dobbins, Gus Bus. Somebody's more bruiser, somebody's more finesse. It could certainly work. It's really exciting, man. I am actually really excited to see these two on a new team.
It is, and we know they want to run the ball.
Yep.
They shored up the offensive line. They want to run the ball. I mean, Harbaugh has come out and said this. And not only that, yeah, they want to run the ball. They don't really have any receivers. They have a rookie and a second-year guy who didn't really do anything last year, and Josh Palmer. Of course. Their wide receiver one, Josh Palmer.
Thank God.
Yeah. No, we got it. We're good. We got Josh Palmer.
We're totally good here,
fine.
guys.
Everything's fine.
We'll
we have one of the
Gus
most
Bus and
expensive
JK.
quarterbacks in the NFL, and we've got him Josh Palmer. We're fine. No big deal.
Totally
We're all good. But this is a situation, this backfield, I wish I could give everyone more information right now, but we just have to see more. It's too early right now, but keep an eye on these guys. Watch camp, because you're absolutely right. Right now, Gus Bus is in that territory with me, with Devin Singletary, Zach Moss.
Totally.
I like those guys. They're great depth pieces in a juicy matchup, which he'll have in their division. It's a guy that you can play in spot start here and there. It's not a guy you're going to have to throw out there early in the season anyway. But pay attention. And like you said with JK Dobbins, it's really kind of worth a flyer pick, I mean, it's worth a flyer pick to see what is the situation. Are they going to be involved? If JK Dobbins looks good and it is a 1A, 1B situation, and the amount of volume, the running backs that they're going to get in Los Angeles this year, absolutely worth a flyer. Absolutely worth a flyer.
John, regarding Gus Bus, because you mentioned it, in the realm of like where you're drafting him, Devin Singletary, et cetera, what about Zeke? Right? Zeke falls right into that particular realm. We talked about Zeke in last episode. ADP of Zeke is 127. ADP of that is Gus Edwards at 125. If you're on the clock and you need a running back, are you leaning more towards Zeke or are you leaning more towards Gus Edwards, and why?
It is going to depend on what the backfield looks like during camp. If Gus Edwards is the starter and JK is just kind of a guy that comes in and mix things up, that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now as of first week of August.
Yeah.
Man, it sounds weird.
Stop.
It feels weird. It feels weird. I'm probably going to take Zeke, actually, at that point. Yeah, I mean, you're talking, it's a late pick. You're not spending the world on him here. And I think it's going to be Zeke because the backfield just isn't as cloudy and as crowded to me as the backfield in Los Angeles. I mean, it could be a 50-50 split between these guys, and you may not get tons of value out of either of them. Zeke, I think Zeke's going to get the volume. I don't know if it's going to go all season. I think early on, Zeke will get the rock a lot. I think his ability in a PPR or half PPR is going to be a lot better as well. I don't see JK or Gus Edwards catching a lot of passes out of the backfield.
No.
So yeah, as of right now, I'm going with Zeke in that situation. I think it's just better opportunity, more opportunity. Okay, moving on here. Let's get to our last guy here in the AFC. New face and new place, Antonio Gibson, leaving the Washington Commanders, now with the New England Patriots. Interesting role. We all love this role that Zeke seemed to have last year. Ramondre, we've seen him do it. We've seen James White. We've seen this position. This is a pass-catching running back out of the backfield. Should have some value here in New England, if there's any value to give. Frankie, tell us what that might be.
This is James White 2.0. Antonio Gibson is James White 2.0. If you remember back when he was in Washington, he was a receiver converted to a running back. He doesn't have the frame to be able to be a 3-down back, but he's so elusive. And when he gets the ball out of the backfield, especially from a pass catching perspective, that he's a nightmare for that of linebackers. John, and what's interesting too, he signed a 3-year, $11 million deal, 5.3 guaranteed. That is a fairly substantial contract for a guy who had, right, from a stats perspective last year, John, he had 265 rushing yards, 265 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 48 receptions, which is really interesting, 389 yards receiving, and that of 2 receiving touchdowns. John, he finished, in kind of the back of the pack, if I'm being honest with you, and to get an $11 million deal. So what this tells me is he's absolutely going to be the 3rd down back next to that of Ramondre Stevenson, I think the proof is in the pudding when they saw what Zeke was able to do, being, we talked about it last episode, being their leading receiver with over 50 receptions or right around that 50 reception mark. And so I think that they'll be able to replicate that really well with Antonio Gibson, and with him being a little bit younger, a little bit more tread on the tires. It could be interesting, but $11 million for Antonio Gibson, that just seems really expensive for this guy, but we'll see what happens, man. It should be interesting.
This is not a team that throws money around.
No.
I mean, it's not. We've seen New England let people go constantly that were excellent because they didn't want to pay him. So to bring this guy on who's a backup running back, a satellite back at that, can't really handle the load for $11 million is interesting. I mean, if you look at last year with the Commanders, I mean, that is his bread and butter is receiving out of the backfield. He had more receiving yards than rushing yards last year, but he had 59 targets. Then we looked at Zeke when he was with the Patriots, he had 65 targets. So if he's going to get the targets, I mean, he's going to fit into that role there with New England. So I think there could be an opportunity. First of all, I don't want anybody on the New England Patriots.
No.
I just don't. I'm not drafting anyone. I don't care who the quarterback is right now, whether it's Drake May or Brissett. Doesn't make me feel, real warm and toasty. If I get Ramondre at a discount because he drops, and he may, I think a lot of people are in the same boat as me as not wanting anybody on this team. Ramondre drops to a certain degree, then I'll pick him up. But there's really not anybody else that I'm looking at drafting on this team. But Antonio Gibson could be interesting. I mean, it could be a guy late in your draft that you pick up because you need some additional depth. Because he got paid, because he can get 65 targets out of the backfield. If you're in a PPR, half PPR, I think there could be some value. Don't go after him. But if he's sitting there and you're just like, I don't even know the rest of these guys, and Antonio Gibson's sitting there, I just need one more flyer pick, I think it'd be okay to take him because it could be a guy you could even put in your flex in an emergency situation. But that's really all I would expect out of him. What do you think?
John, I think that's a good call. I think that this guy could be kind of like a Tajay Spears. I think that's the path that makes a lot of sense for him. I know I keep saying James White, but that's just because it's the Patriot way. It's an easy comp there. But I think a more realistic for the times right now is that of Tajay Spears. And therefore, you have Ramondre kind of the brute, but it's also interesting because Ramondre was doing well at pass catching before Zeke even got there. So do the Patriots even really trust Ramondre from the pass catching perspective? Antonio Gibson is certainly going to get that role. And then the other part of it is like, do you want Ramondre now? Because does this completely deplete his upside? Like, is it capped now? And so for me, man, there's just so many unknowns to your point. When you really start unpacking the Patriots offense, like we could see Javon Baker, their receiver from UCF, the rookie, end up coming alive and being an absolute badass, or Jalen Polk, right? The rookie receiver from that of Washington, who apparently is doing turning a lot of heads in camp. But when we talk about the running back situation, when we talk about some of the upside, John, I just think it's elsewhere. But for Gibson, man, take a late round flyer on him. I don't think it's a bad move. I think it's just something that we could see if, God forbid, if Ramondre gets hurt, that could really change things for Gibson. But yeah, it's too early to tell him. It's really interesting to see how this offense is going to pan out.
Take him as a flyer. If he's not involved in the first couple of weeks, you can drop him to pick up, somebody on the waiver wire, whoever that sexy waiver wire pickup that we always have in week 1 that scores 2 touchdowns and he's a receiver 3 on a team.
Oh, Sammy Watkins? Yeah.
Sammy Watkins. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think he and Ramondre will cancel each other out. I really do think that neither of them are really going to have much fantasy value if they're both on the field together. There's not a lot of upside there. I don't think the team is going to have enough opportunity. The only hope is that they're getting killed in every game, that they have to come back from behind, and Antonio Gibson is on the field most of the time. That's not a risk I'm willing to take when I'm drafting my team on Labor Day. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Totally.
All right. Anything else on Antonio Gibson, man?
No, sir.
All right. That is our episode for today, guys. Running backs in the AFC, new faces and new places. What do we have coming up for everybody soon, Frank?
Guys, next week, we are going to be diving into that of the receivers, right? We're going to be getting into where these guys are coming from, where they're heading to, and being able to see how it's going to affect your fantasy drafts today. So keep in tune with what's happening, not only in training camp, but also what Frankly Fantasy is going to be putting out for you all this coming week.
Thank you so much for following us and for subscribing, guys. Make sure you sub up. Subscribe to YouTube, baby. We've got videos, we've got charts, we've got two beautiful faces here you can look at as well. I mean, come on now. Look at that face. You're beautiful. You're chiseled. You're like a Greek god, Frank. But join us, Frankly Fantasy Football, all social media as well. We love you guys. Thank you for joining us. And may the fantasy gods smile upon you. Bye.